What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Sports Menu. And we're back from MLB Monday. We're locked in here. Let's get into it. All of my social medias, X/Twitter, Facebook, and Discord are in the description of this episode. Right here. And the past couple ones in the description of these episodes. There's like a summary of what we did episode, all my social medias that I have right now, and if I add any social media can also be down there, so check down there to stay update. And yeah, that's it. Everything we're good. Today's MLB Monday. And for the MLB Monday, all we're gonna do today is go over the MLB standings, what each team did this week, and yeah, then we're gonna go over MLB's stat leaders like ERA, home runs, stuff like that. And then yeah, that's it. That's literally it. I'm probably not gonna do any like awards or power rankings or anything into the playoffs, and then we'll do. So in a few weeks we'll just so for the rest of the playoffs, the road to the playoffs, the rest of this month, we're gonna be doing this, and then before the playoffs start, the MLB Monday before the playoffs start, we're gonna be going over the official MLB playoff predictions, awards, and everything else like that. So yeah, let's just get into the news. I don't think there's much. I really don't think there's much at all. Alright, baseball news. Let's go. Nathan Eovaldi likely to miss the rest of the season with a strained rotator cuff. I believe that's in his shoulder. Yeah, he's going to be out for the rest of the season more than likely, and that sucks. Nathan Eovaldi had a sub-2 ERA. He was just ridiculous. He was throwing nasty stuff as well. He was really working. Over in Texas, he had 11-3 record, 1.73 ERA, 129 strikeouts, 0.85 WHIP, which is 7th best in the league, and just disgusting overall. Yeah, sucks with the Rangers. That's really gonna hold the playoff chances are already pretty beat up at this point. So yeah. Red Sox announced that they have released Walker Buehler. Walker Buehler is no longer a Red Sox. And Trey Turner and Alec Boehm are both to the IL. They were very good for the Phillies, losing a couple of key players. The roster, hopefully they're back soon enough so they don't miss much time and the Phillies can get right back on track. So that's the baseball news. Over the MLB standings. MLB standings. MLB standings, Toronto Blue Jays. The Toronto Blue Jays. Now I went for my phone to load. This is not the time. Not the time. Not the time. Alright, we're good. So, the Blue Jays, September 1st, they lose to the Reds. Unfortunate game. They're up 4-2 heading into the 9th inning. Heading into the bottom of the 9th inning. 4-2, let up 3 runs. They scored 3 runs in the 9th inning to take a 4-2 lead. And then they let up 3 runs of their own to the Reds in the bottom of the 9th to get walked off. They answer back the next night, 12-9. High-scoring matchup. They took the W there. Then the next night, they scored 13 runs. It's a 13-9 win. So back-to-back in 25 runs in the past 2 games at this point for the Blue Jays. 2 high-scoring matchups and wins. And then They get a day off, and then they can pick back up on Friday, September 5th, to start the series. This is the Yankees. They start in a blowout 7-1 victory, and then they lose back-to-back. First one 3-1 to the Yankees, second one 4-3 to the Yankees. They lose back-to-back to the Yankees. They lose a series to the Yankees, and then tomorrow they start a 2-game series versus the Houston. Actually, I don't know if it's 2 games. I don't think it's 2 games. Yeah, the Blue Jays this week. Let's see. 3-3 record this past week. They did have a day off as well in between. And so, yeah, the Blue Jays are 82. And 61. Sitting on top of the AL East right now, 2 games ahead of the Yankees, 3.5 games ahead of the Red Sox. They did drop the critical series versus the Yankees, but should be fine. New York Yankees, number 2 in the AL East, 80-63 record, 559.1 percentage. 2 games behind the Yankees. Yeah, 2 games behind the Blue Jays. Goodness. So yeah, this past week, they blow out the Astros 7-1, then they lose to the Astros 8-7, and then the next night they get out of. They're up 4 in the bottom of the 9th, bases loaded with 1 out. They were up by 4 when the Astros are bases loaded with 1 out in the bottom of the 9th, and they get 2 back-to-back strikeouts. They get the W 8-4 in Houston to win the series, and then they lose to Toronto on Friday, and then they bounce back with 2 back-to-back wins on Saturday over the weekend, and then they go back tomorrow for a series versus the Detroit Tigers. It's going to be very interesting to see how they do. But yeah, those 2 games behind the Blue Jays overall. They are arguably the best batting team in the league. Because if first in total bases, first in home runs, first in on-base OPS, and first in the most runs in the league. So yeah, they were just really good. They scored a lot of runs, very high-scoring team overall. Them and the Blue Jays, 2 very high-scoring teams to the AL East. Number 3 in the AL East got the Boston Red Sox, 79-65 record, 549 win percentage, 3.5 games behind the Blue Jays, a game and a half behind the Yankees. So yeah, the 5-5 in the last 10. This week they've had an overall pretty bad week. They lose back-to-back to the Red Sox, 6-4 and then 11-7, and then they beat the Guardians 6-4, then 11-7, and then they lose 3 straight games, 1 to the Guardians, 8-1 in a blowout, and then 10-5 to the Diamondbacks and 5-1 to the Diamondbacks. They bounce back at 7-4 W in Arizona to end the series. This is Arizona. They lose the series. This is Arizona, and then they head in Oakland tonight at 9:05 p.m. Central, 10:05 Eastern, and 7:05 Pacific. But they need to pick up some huge wins. This is the Oakland Athletics here to really try to catch some ground in the AL East race before it gets too late. Tampa Bay Rays, 71-72 record, 11 games behind. They're just out of the race at this point. We look over here. They are 4 games outside of a wild card spot. So it's not impossible to make a wild card spot, but very unlikely. They start out the week by sweeping the Mariners 10-2, 6-5, and then 9-4. And then they win against the Guardians. 4-game win streak, and then they lose 3 times in a row to the Guardians. The 3-game losing streak right now heading into a series in Chicago versus the Chicago White Sox. So yeah, very up and down. The Rays just came off a 7-game win streak and then lost 3 straight. So yeah, I want to see if they answer in Chicago this weekend. Not this weekend, this week. Baltimore Orioles now 66-77 record, 462 win percentage, 16 games behind, 6-4 in the last 10. So not terrible, right? They start out the week in a sweep over the Padres somehow, and then they beat the Dodgers in the series. But they did lose the most recent game, but they went on a bit of a 5-game win streak there, including sweeping the Padres and then beating the Dodgers twice. So they win a 5-game win streak all in the NL West. And then they end the series in Baltimore versus the Dodgers in the 5-2L. They're going to play in Baltimore again, but this time versus the Pirates. So yeah, they're basically they're out of it at this point. But yeah, good for them to get some wins at this point. And then the AL Central, the Detroit Tigers lead the AL Central. 82-62 record, 1 more loss than the Blue Jays with the same amount of wins, 569 win percentage. They're quite comfy in the top of the AL Central spot right now. So yeah, I mean they're looking pretty comfy right there right now. So yeah, as the Tigers this week go down here, started losing twice in a row to the Mets, and combined 22-13 over those two games, and they bounced back with a huge win over the Mets. And then they lose a series to the White Sox. So they lost back-to-back series. This is the Mets and the White Sox, respectively. They're in New York to play the Yankees. They're going to have to bounce back to try to get some momentum this last month of the regular season to obviously October, the playoff start. Next, Kansas City Royals, 73-70 record, 5-10 win percentage, 5-5 in the last 10, 8.5 games behind the Tigers. 2 games behind the wild card spot, so it's very, very possible that they do make a wild card spot. But this week, they lose the alright, so they lose the series versus the Angels, and then they win the series versus the Twins, and they're currently losing 3-0 to the Guardians. But this week's overall been pretty up and down. They lose the series versus the Angels, and they win the series versus the Twins. They need to become a little bit more consistent and win some more games down the stretch if they want to make the playoff spot. So yeah, next the Cleveland Guardians, 72-70 record, 507 win percentage, 6-4 in the last 10, 3 straight wins, 9 games behind the Tigers, only half a game behind the Kansas City Royals. This week's been a great week for the Guardians. They started off on a rough note, losing twice to the Red Sox, and then they smoked the Red Sox 8-1 to end the series. They lose to the Rays, and they beat them twice in a row, and then they just beat the Rays again. Actually, they beat them 3 times in a row, and they're beating the Royals 3-0 right now. So yeah, they're in a 3-game win streak right now, 6-4 in the last 10. They're really trying to catch the Royals, and if they beat them today and they hang on, they will officially overtake the Royals. We're second in the AL Central. So yeah. And the Minnesota Twins, 63-80 record, 441 win percentage, 3-7 in the last 10. Trade away basically the whole team, and they have felt it. They're swept by the White Sox in 4-game series, and then lose the series to the Royals. Not looking very good. This week was a very, very bad week for them, and just keep going down here for the Twins. And then the Chicago White Sox officially eliminated from the playoffs, I believe. Them and the Rockies are the only 2 teams to be officially eliminated from the playoffs. So yeah, I mean that's pretty interesting. 55-89 record, 382 win percentage. They are 7-3 in the last 10 though somehow. Go back, they sweep the Twins in a 4-game series. They continue the hot streak and come into Detroit and pull off an upset. And then Detroit says not happening. They beat them 6-0, and then the White Sox went to beat again. The White Sox are kind of on fire right now. They're coming in. They have a home series versus the Rays coming up. Interested to see how they do. We go down here to the AL West, and we got the Houston Astros, 78-66 record. In front of the AL West, 2.5 games ahead of the Mariners. 4-6 in the last 10. Not doing that great right now, but you know what, good enough. So they beat the Angels to start off the week, and then they lose the series versus the Yankees, and then they lose the series versus the Rangers. Not looking too high right now. They need to turn it around as they play a series versus the Blue Jays. It's going to be very tough to turn it around. There, Seattle Mariners, 75-68 record, 524 win percentage, 4-6 in the last 10, just like the Astros, 2.5 games behind the Astros. As they are in a playoff spot right now, but only 1.5 games ahead of the Rangers, as they are the last team in the AL wildcard spot right now. Seattle Mariners this week get swept by the Rays, and then lose to the Braves, and then ended up beating them a combined 28-4. So they said, you know what, we'll lose. I'm just gonna let all my anger out on you guys. Smoked them, demolished them 2 nights in a row, as they needed that, and hopefully for them they catch some momentum and get some ground in the AL West, as the Astros are struggling. 3, Texas Rangers. Texas Rangers, 74-70 record, 514 win percentage, 7-3 in the last 10. They're trying to catch some ground in the AL wildcard race. They start out the week by beating the Diamondbacks 7-5 in the 10th inning, and then lose back-to-back for the Diamondbacks to lose the series. and then they win the series over the Astros, which is huge, and they try to catch them ground. They are outside the playoffs. They are 1.5 games outside the playoffs, behind their division rival, the Seattle Mariners. Is very interested to see how they do down the stretch here at this point. Next, Angels. Los Angeles Angels. 67-76 record, 469 win percentage, 10.5 games behind the Astros. 8 games behind the wild card spot. They're all but out at this point. This week it was a rough run. They lose to the Astros, and then they actually beat the Royals in the series. And then they get smoked by the Athletics 2 nights in a row. They barely pull out a win at the end of the series, but they do end up losing the series. They will play the struggling Twins to try to get some W's here. And then the Oakland Athletics, 66-78 record, 4-6 in the last 10, 458 win percentage. 12 games behind. 12 games behind the Houston Astros and 9.5 games outside the playoff spot. This week it's been pretty tough for them as well. They lose the series to the Cardinals, and then they do win the series with the Angels. They smoke them 2 nights in a row, then they lose. Then the series, but they play a 3-game homestand versus the Red Sox, and be a very tough series. But we'll see how they handle it. We go down here to the National League, starting in the NL East. Number 1, 83-60 record is the Philadelphia Phillies. 83-60 record, 581 percentage, 7-3 in the last 10. This week they win the series versus the Brewers, which is very impressive. They win the series against the Marlins, and then they start the series today versus the Mets. They're winning 1-0 in the top of the 4th. Yeah, they're looking really good right now. The Phillies are looking like a top team. Number 2, the Mets. 76-67 record, 531 win percentage, 4-6 in the last 10. They haven't been that great lately, but good enough for them to be 4 games ahead of the Reds in the last wild card spot right now. They win the series versus the Tigers, and then they lose the series versus the Reds. So up and down week overall for the Mets, but we'll see how they respond versus this series versus the Phillies. And then got the Marlins, 66-77 record, 462 win percentage, 4-6 in the last 10. They get swept by the Nationals, and then they almost get swept by the Phillies. They're able to squeak one out on Sunday, but lose 5 of 6 this weekend, including 5 in a row, and they barely able to squeak one out to end the week. Braves, 64-79 record, 19 games behind the Phillies. 19 games behind the Phillies, 12 games behind the wild card spot right now. 64-79 record, 448 win percentage, doing 7 in the last 10. They've had up and down week, a decent week, but up and down. And then the Nationals, 24.5 games behind the Phillies, 58-84 record, 408 win percentage, 5-5 in the last 10, 2-game win streak. They sweep the Marlins, and they somehow beat the Cubs in the series. They're kind of on fire lately, but yeah. The Brewers in the NL Central, 89-55 record, 618 win percentage. Comfortably at the top of the NL Central right now, 6-4 in the last 10. And this week they lose the series to the Phillies and then sweep the Pirates for this week. Yeah, the Brewers, I am pretty high on the Brewers. I'm not going to pick them to win the World Series, though, because they haven't proved to me enough that they can get it done in the in October, but they are looking very good right now. Chicago Cubs, my favorite team. 81-62 record, 7.5 games behind the Brewers. But 5 games up in the wild card spot, the best wild card team in the NL right now. 81-62 record, 566 win percentage, 5-5 record. This week's been pretty tough. They did win the series with the Braves barely, and then they lose the series with the Nationals, which is very tough, and losing 3-0 to the Braves right now. This week's been pretty tough for the Cubs. Let's see how they respond. The Reds are number 3, 16.5 games behind the Brewers. 4 games outside of a wild card spot. 72-71 record. 503 win percentage, 4-6 record in the last 10, 2-game win streak. They lose the series versus the Blue Jays, and then they win the series versus the Mets barely. So yeah. 4 Cardinals, only half a game behind the Reds, of 17 games. behind the Brewers and about 4.5 games behind the wildcard spot. 72-72 record, exactly 500 win percentage. 7-3 record in the last 10 2-game win streak. They try to catch them down and potentially make a playoff spot. At this point, it's going to be very, very tough, but they're trying. That's for sure. They are trying. So yeah. This week, they won the series versus the Athletic and then won the series versus the Giants. Pretty impressive. Overall, the Pittsburgh Pirates, 25 games behind the Brewers. They're outside the playoffs. They're basically eliminated at this point. 64-80 record, 444, 1%, 5-5 in the last 10, 3-game losing streak. This week, they sweep the Dodgers somehow and then get swept by the Brewers. A very up and down week, that's for sure. So, yeah, that's the NL Central. And last but certainly not least, you got the NL West. Going with the Dodgers, 79-64 record. Top of the NL West. 552 win percentage, 3-7 in the last 10. They have been struggling lately. Swept by the Pirates and lose the series as the Orioles. They've been struggling. Yeah, they just need to get back on the right track. They need to get back on the right track if they want to do anything in October. Let's see what they do though. And then we got the Padres, 78-65 record, 545 win percentage, also 3-7 in the last 10. They won back-to-back games, only one game behind the Dodgers. This week's been very bad for them. They get swept by the Orioles, and then they lose to the Rockies, but then they get 2 huge wins versus the Rockies. They win that series, and they're heading into San Diego, back home, play the Reds. So, yeah, we're going to have to see what they do. And then number 3 is the Giants. 72-71 record, 7 games behind the Dodgers. 7 games behind the Dodgers, 4 games behind the wildcard spot, tied with the Reds currently. 503 win percentage, 7-3 in the last 10. They've been on fire lately. Swept the Rockies and then lost to the Cardinals in a series, though, which is tough. But overall, they've been great lately. Diamondbacks, 72-72 record, 500 win percentage, 7-3 in the last 10, 7.5 games. Behind the Dodgers, 4.5 games behind the wildcard spot. This week, started off pretty bad. They lose to the Rangers 7-5 in extra innings, but then they beat the Rangers twice in a row, and then they win those series to the Red Sox. They're pretty good this week to try to catch them down, and then obviously the Rockies are just there. 39 games behind the Dodgers, just ridiculous. 39 games behind the Dodgers, 36 games behind the wildcard spot. 40-103 record, 280 win percentage, 2-8 in the last 10. This week, get swept by the Giants, beat the Padres somehow, and then get smacked by them twice in a row. So yeah, that's it for that. We're gonna go over to the stat leaders. Batting leaders, batting average. Number 1, Aaron Judge, 321 average for the New York Yankees. And then Jacob Wilson for the Athletics, 315 batting average. 3, Bo Bichette for the Toronto Blue Jays, 311 batting average. 4, Trey Turner for the Philadelphia Phillies, which sadly got put on IL, but I don't know when he's going to be back, but hopefully pretty soon. 305, and then 5 of Jeremy Pena for the Houston Astros, 304 batting average. Pitching leaders when it comes to wins. Number 1, 3-way tie for number 1, Max Fried for the Yankees, Carlos Rodon for the Yankees, and Freddie Peralta for the Brewers, 16 wins respectively. 4, Garrett Crochet for the Red Sox, 14 wins, and then number 5, Taylor Screwball for the Tigers, 13 wins, and then home runs, Kyle Rowley, jeez. In Seattle Mariners, 53 home runs, and 2, Kyle Schwarber for the Phillies, 49 home runs, 3, Shohei Ohtani for the Dodgers, 48 home runs, 4, Eugenio Ceres for the currently play for the Mariners but play for the Diamondbacks, 45 home runs, and then number 5 is Aaron Judge, 43 home runs. ERA, number 1, Paul Skeens, 1.98, number 2, Taylor Screwball, 2.1, 3, Hunter Brown, 2.25, 4, Freddie Peralta for the Brewers, 2.5, and then 5, Christopher Sanchez for the Phillies, 2.6. RBIs, number 1, Kyle Schwarber for the Phillies, 120. 2, Pete Alonso for the Mets, 113. Also, Kyle Rowley for the Seattle Mariners, 113. Eugenio Ceres for the Mariners, 109. And then Riley Green for Detroit, 103. Most saves in the league, Carlos Estevez for the Royals, 38. Robert Suarez for the Padres, 36.